Now, the Met Office has warned that an El Nino event currently developing in the Pacific could be the strongest in living memory. The natural phenomenon can push up global temperatures and increase the risk of extreme weather around the world. Scientists say it is likely to make 2027 the hottest year on record, I'm afraid, as its effects combine with human-driven climate change. Joining me now is Hayley Fowler, Professor of Climate Change Impacts at the University of Newcastle. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Explain then, an El Nino event currently developing in the Pacific. What does that mean?
El Nino is a natural phenomenon. It happens about every 2 to 7 years on average. What we see is the trade winds that normally blow from the east across the Pacific. They push water basically across towards Asia. They weaken. And what happens is all of that warm water that's been basically getting gradually warmer over near Asia sloshes back across the Pacific Ocean. And that's called an El Nino event. And what that does is that releases a huge amount of heat to the atmosphere.
And what is the impact of that?
It's got varying impacts in different parts of the world, but as you can imagine, you're taking away that nice, warm, moist air from the Asian region. So what we see is droughts and very dry and hot conditions in those regions following an El Nino. And that's what we're seeing happening at the moment. We're seeing a weaker monsoon. We will probably see very dry, hot conditions in Australia and Asia their summer, but our winter, and possibly the problem with forest fires. And then in other parts of the world, for example, in the western side of the US and Peru and places like that, you see a lot of floods. And it also has an effect on the UK as well. We tend to see wet and stormy autumns and winters following El Nino events.
We'll come back to the impact, the long term and the kind of distant impact to, for example, the UK in a second. But why? I'm sorry, this is a really simplistic question, but why might this be the strongest in living memory?
Well, we don't know, honestly, whether this is connected to climate change. As I say, it's a natural phenomenon. What we do know, however, is that the oceans store about 90% of the heat, the extra heat, because of the greenhouse effect and because of the extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. It is going to be unprecedented, this El Nino. The previous biggest El Nino was in 1877. It had a huge and dramatic effect on the world. It caused about 50 million deaths, mostly over in Asia, through large problems with crop failures and famines. And that was about 3 to 4% of the world's population. Now, obviously not saying that's going to happen, right? Because we've got a much more globalized society. We've got many more ways of transferring resources around the world now than we had in 1877. But you can see the sort of major impacts that these type of events can have on the world.
I'm looking at kind of immediate effects. For example, the Panama Canal Authority is told shipping firms that 32 vessels a day will be able to pass through it from the 15th of September. That's compared to 36 currently. It doesn't sound like a huge reduction, but these things have knock-on effects.
Yeah, they do. I mean, I was hearing this morning about the effect on the Panama Canal, and obviously the water levels there are already reduced compared to normal conditions. And as I say, they've already seen a weakening of the Indian monsoon because of this, and we can expect a consequent reduction on crop yields, particularly rice production, I suppose, in Asia this year. And that's coupled with, of course, the problems we've already seen in Europe and the UK with heat waves and the crop failures we've seen in Europe because of that.
What is the impact then on the UK and Europe, not just in terms of weather, because scientists now saying that this is likely to make 2027 the hottest year on record, but also in terms of, economically speaking, because if we look at, for example, what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz and the impact that has here and the effect on, as you said, crops in the UK because of the weather, what might this mean in the next 6 months, next year for the United Kingdom and for Europe?
I think certainly what it will mean for the United Kingdom are floods, actually. We're talking about a new period now of climate whiplash. You've probably heard this term before. It's certainly been bandied around in the media. We seem to get very persistent dry weather followed by wet weather. We can expect very wet weather in the UK this autumn and winter because of the El Nino that is developing, and because the atmosphere, that El Nino is happening on top of an already very much warmer atmosphere. We're 1.5 degrees warmer globally than pre-industrial times now, and that's that first level of the Paris Agreement that we've already reached. So we can expect much wetter conditions, and you look outside your window at the moment, soils are very dry. A lot of that water initially and that extra rain is going to run off, potentially causing floods, and then perhaps, the type of conditions we saw with the last strong El Nino was 2015-16, much less strong than the one we can expect. But if you remember Storm Desmond, and that was the record 24-hour rainfall in the UK. So those are the type of conditions we can expect this winter.
Whenever I talk on the radio about what we can do to try to limit the effects of this, I obviously mean, in terms of shoring up defences or adapting our houses or whatever. I do understand that people will say, hang on a second, what about the bit before that? That sometimes feels like a massive kind of macro event that people like, me and my neighbours, we can't do much about. What then? I mean, should we be having a actual government level debate about how we can limit the effects of extreme weather?
I think we need to have that debate. So I was part of something called the National Emergency Briefing last November at Westminster Central Hall, and we've produced a film called the People's Emergency Briefing as a result of that. And what was I don't know, it was interesting just last week when we had the major fires in Stourbridge. The petition that's associated with that film basically reached 10,000 signatures a day, and we've now gone over that 100,000 signature barrier, and they'll have to debate that in Parliament, which will be nice to see, because I think that what we're asking for here really is for the public to be honestly informed of the facts by government, a bit like during the COVID briefings by Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty. So about the government being honest with the public about where we are now, where we're going to be, say, in 5 or 10 years' time, and what we need to do about it.
Absolutely. I do feel, and I'm not saying that people who are flooded out their homes could have done X, Y, or Z. I'm not saying that, farmers could have done X, Y, and Z. But, we know now that things are going to be maybe extreme, and we have to be, we have to be told, I suppose, or we have to discuss how we can limit the damage. Hayley, thank you very much for speaking to us this afternoon on Times Radio. It's Hayley Fowler, Professor of Climate Change Impacts at the University of Newcastle.